I did this drawing of this Sydney Post Office Cafe for a previous video, and I drew it using Copic multi-liner pens. But I've decided to put some tone, some marker tone over the top of it and just see what sort of difference that makes. Now, I have done hatching because I was expecting this to stand alone as a line drawing when I first drew it, which probably means I'm going to use possibly slightly lighter tonal choices because the hatching that's already there will darken the effect. I'm using Copic sketch markers, and as always, I'm using the brush end. So I start with an N0, the lightest tonal value. And at this point, I'm still trying to just play around and work out what I'm going to do. I think I'm going to leave white, the paper coming through, for the lightest value on the building, on these columns. So I'm just using N0, the lightest one here, to put some colour, or some value really, rather than colour. And I think here as well. I think possibly with this frangipani tree, I do want some sense of bright reflected highlights coming through. So I'll do a fairly jagged marking technique here, and we'll come over the top of that darker later. And I think I do want to put some tone on the roof because I want it to stand out against the sky. So again, I'll use my N0, and I can always come across it or across parts of it with a darker tone if I want to, but you can't do it the other way. One of the benefits of using the same brand alcohol marker as fine liner is that they shouldn't smudge. So now I'm going to go for a darker tonal contrast. I'm going to try N3 for this darker section under the veranda and see how dark that looks with the hatching lines coming through. And I'll repeat that up here and in here. And under here, and under here, in here, well, if that's a 3, I'm going to use an N2 then to try this shadow that's cast onto the front of our veranda. Oh, I forgot about the chimney shadow when I originally did this. Now I need to get a little more effect in with this frangipani tree. And I haven't actually got complete line work cover here, but that's okay because I can use my values here to create that And I think I'm going to use an N1 for this fence because I want it to have a darker local colour than the front of the cafe. Do I want to use this one for anything while I have it? I don't think so. Oh, actually I might, yes, I might just use it to accentuate some of the across the road shops, which in contrast makes the columns come out a little more strongly. And I'm thinking I might actually play with an N4 as well. Now I really do think this is going to be my darkest value. So I'm making choices where I put it. And I think there's a fair bit here now to come into this tree. And I'm just wondering whether to go a 5 at all, or whether to be satisfied with what I've got. I'm going to use my 0 again for this planter box for the local colour. So that means it's nothing to do with shade or shadow, it's to do with the colour of the planter box. And I think I'm going to do the same thing here for this footpath. Again, I'll just that's an N0, which is the one I intended to use, so that's good. And I'm going to do just a tone darker for the road surface. And that also just anchors the corner a little bit here. And I might go a tone darker again for the gutter. So while I've got this 2, I might use it for some local colour here, just on this shrub, which was rather undefined. And I'm thinking I'm getting pretty close to this being finished. No, I do have some frangipani shadow, which again, I didn't actually think to do with the hatching, and it's quite dark relatively to the other tonal values. So I'm going to go back to my 3. I'll put that 2 back. Try and get a few more leaf looking shapes there, and I think that works well. And what do I want to do here? I'm just wondering whether to go a little bit darker. There is actually a shadow that does go down there. I think it's actually shade, not shadow. So I'll do that because I think that works well. What do I think? Look, I think probably The only thing I do is I'm just going to add a little bit, and I think using my 3, just a bit of reinforcement for these shadows of the tiles. These terracotta tiles are incredibly common in Sydney for buildings of a certain period that lasted about 100 years. So it is good to suggest them. And I will darken this chimney shadow as well. And I think that's it. So what was this? 10, 11 minutes to really, I think, quite transform a scene and to really make it pop, to really make it come out. And I think the only thing I need to do is this column's looking a bit white here. It needs a shadow there and it needs a shadow here as it's affected by the frangipani light. But otherwise, I think we're done. Now, how's that? Like 10 minutes. Alcohol sketch markers really can transform a drawing. And for this, I actually only used 5 of them. So for this drawing, for the cost of just 5 alcohol markers, doesn't matter what brand you use, but use the same color in the same brand to make sure that we get a nice gradation of tone. And in just minutes, we can really transform what we've done. All that's left now is the reveal. This isn't my usual drawing paper, it's a lighter paper, and the ink has actually bled under the paper. But with my normal drawing cartridge, that's not a problem at all. So here we have our Sydney Cafe post office building, which I think has really popped into life using just 5 alcohol-based markers. G'day, I'm Stephen Travers. I hope you found this interesting and helpful. And why not, if you haven't used alcohol-based ink markers with your line work, give it a go. They're particularly useful on location where often we want to capture effect very quickly. They're a wonderful medium to do that with. But hey, whatever you're drawing and however you're drawing it, make sure you have fun. I'll see you next time. Bye.